Hey there, Damien here from Game Innovator, and today I'll be bringing you something a bit different. It's going to be one of my own stories, in fact my first short story that I've written in a pretty long time actually, so yeah, getting back into the swing of things in terms of creativity, and yeah, the story is called Spanish Slices Chapter 1, and it's about a futuristic conflict between Spain and Britain. So without further ado, let's get started. So, Chapter 1. Fear gripped the heart of Corporal Sorev Lua as his squad prepared to disembark from the transport. His second in command and trusted friend was Jonas Diz, who he'd known from before the academy. He had hoped that his squad would see action, but to his surprise they were only to be used to defend the transport and provide support for the disembarking troops. What do you think? Think we'll see anything interesting? Sorev asked Jonas. Don't know. This is the first time anything like this has been attempted, he replied. Their transport lurched slightly as it re-entered the Martian atmosphere. On the console, Sorev could see the domed city of the British colony New London. He could hardly believe that they would be invading it with such a pitiful amount of troops. Given how thinly stretched we are out here, I'm sure you boys will see plenty of action, Lieutenant Hernandez Gonzalez remarked grimly. Sorev thought about the grizzled veteran's experiences with war on Earth and wondered how different Mars would be. We've got surprise on our side at least, but they'll come down on us hard once the word is out, Jonas said. I don't care about surprise, I just want to see something happen after waiting in the middle of nowhere for so long, Sorev exclaimed. Excitement started to flow through Sorev's veins as a nearby explosion rocked their cramped transport. He and the other soldiers visibly tensed up as they neared the colony in anticipation of the attack. Unidentified Spanish transports, you are within restricted British airspace. Identify yourselves immediately and report to landing pad 34. The stern British voice rang through their ears through the comms channel. New London Air Control, this is Transport 304F, transporting rations and mining equipment to the colony's industrial sector, the pilot replied. There is no schedule for such a shipment. Please hold your current position, came the reply. They're not going to buy this, Jonas whispered. Well, that just means that things will be much more interesting when we land, Sorev whispered back. Pain reverberated around Sorev's skull as another explosion shook their transport. He didn't think that the ruse would work for long either, but was shocked that the colony's defences were firing on them already. He wondered if their assault was to be destroyed before it had even begun. Hold on guys, this is going to be a rough landing. The pilot's voice was starting to become anxious. A third explosion rattled the entire transport and made a few of the inexperienced soldiers cry out. Hernandez cursed under his breath. Everyone, put on your helmets now, he yelled. Sorev heard a distant explosion while he frantically tried to put on his helmet, the sweat on his palms making his hands slide all over the helmet's mechanisms. Suddenly, something slammed into the side of their transport opposite Sorev. A chunk of the wall was ripped out, and the air rushed out of the transport in seconds. Panic started to creep into Sorev's heart as he saw a few of the soldiers sucked out, along with a chunk of the transport's wall. Within seconds, the transport's air only had Martian atmosphere, and Sorev and the others had desperately put their helmets on. As a warning sound echoed around the chaos in the transport, he wondered how they would land in such a condition. Pilot, what's our current course? Hernandez cried out. We're currently projected to land just beyond the borders of the colony. Sir, I can barely steer her, came the reply. Shit, looks like a piece of another transport took us out, Hernandez exclaimed. Looks like it. We're down from 5 transports to 3. Hold on, I'll try to land her on that flat plane near airlock 2. The pilot almost sounded hopeful. Okay, everyone hold on tight, Hernandez ordered. Don't have to tell me twice, sir, Sorev remarked. Dusty red soil was all that Sorev could see as their transport plummeted towards the ground. Within seconds, the dusty ground rose up to meet them, and with a jolt, the transport struck the surface of the plains. Everything around him shook as the transport skidded along the ground before coming to a stop. To his horror, he could see blood in the cockpit where the pilot was slumped over the controls. "Platoon, report," Hernandez yelled. One by one, the soldiers solemnly called out. Sorev could barely raise his voice when it was his turn. "Jonas, you okay?" he quickly asked his friend at his side. "I think so. Looks like we got lucky," he whispered. "Not all of us." Sorev took another glance at the blood all over the cockpit. Harsh terrain could be seen all around the transport as Sorev and the other soldiers slowly exited the transport. Airlock 2 could be seen in the distance. He felt like running towards it as quickly as possible, if only to get away from the carnage of what had happened. "Transport 3 and 2, report your status," Hernandez called out over the transport's radio. "Silence," greeted him. "Fuck, we've lost contact and visuals of the other transports," he said as he went outside to join his troops. "Men, our mission remains the same as always. We have to assume that there were survivors from the other transports making their way to the other airlocks," he began. "Our goal is still to penetrate into New London's anti-air defences and disable them for a larger invasion to take place. Sorev's squad will approach Airlock 2, while the remaining elements of Gloin's squad will merge into Fleeg's squad to provide cover." The grey, sandblasted metal walls of Airlock 2 greeted Sorev and his squad as they approached the domed city of New London. They had salvaged explosives and other equipment from their transport, and now it seemed there was no turning back from their mission. He turned his head skyward. Above the metal and concrete walls surrounding the airlock, he could see the glass that formed the top part of the dome. "I can't believe we're doing this," he thought. Even after the crash, he could still barely contain his excitement. He signalled the all-clear for Fleeg's squad to come over from their position to the airlock. Hernandez examined the airlock carefully before considering his next move as Fleeg's squad arrived. "Looks like the door hasn't been deadlocked yet. We should be able to get in without too much noise." Hernandez sighed in relief. Wonder was all that Sorev could feel as they skulked around the corridors of New London. This is the first time he had ever been inside the city. He, however, still knew that the decision to continue in the face of such odds would mean more sacrifices in lives to be made. The corridors seemed to blend into one another as the two squads took turns to advance and cover each other. The air was thick with tension and fumes of various machinery that could be heard in distant corridors. The banging of boots on metal could be heard from around the next corner, and Sorev quickly motioned for his advancing squad to halt. Unfortunately, it seemed that the unknown squad heard them as well, since they were silent at the same moment. A few tense seconds passed as Sorev and Jonas looked to Hernandez for instructions. Finally, he motioned for Sorev's squad to throw a grenade around the corner and peek around afterward. Nervousness gripped Sorev as he motioned for his squad to seek cover among the various crates and machinery dotted along the corridor. He quickly crept up to the corner, a grenade in hand. With one swift motion, he threw the grenade around the corner and caught a glimpse of the unknown squad as they opened fire on him. Apologies for that. Don't normally narrate for this song. Anyway, continuing onwards. "Enemies!" Sorev cried out as he withdrew from the corner, bullets ricocheting off the wall near him. He frantically dove for the nearest bit of cover as his grenade exploded. Yells of pain and anguish could be heard from the enemy squad. "Shit, retreat before they return their own grenade." "Fleeg's squad, cover Sorev's retreat," Hernandez yelled out. Sorev and his squad ran for shelter further behind Fleeg's squad as he heard the distinct sound of metal rolling against metal. Shockwaves of pain rippled across Sorev's stomach as he fell behind a broken oiler machine. He felt his stomach lurch as the enemy's grenade exploded and blood sprayed across the corridor. "Sorev, your squad will cover this corridor while Fleeg's squad will use the side corridor to ambush the enemy. Got it?" Hernandez exclaimed. "Yes, sir," Sorev groaned in pain. Fleeg's squad, along with Hernandez, crept back to another corridor as Sorev took stock of the situation around him. He saw two of his men bloodied from the grenade, one slowly crawling to seek cover while the other lay motionless. Jonas, get 2 men to retrieve our wounded. My fire team will cover you, Surev said, almost on autopilot at this stage. Roger that. Griffiths and Paules, get our men into cover. I'll cover with a grenade, Jonas said. Hope was allowed to cautiously enter Surev's thoughts as he saw Jonas and his 2 men stand up from cover. He couldn't help but feel admiration for Jonas, seeming to be as cool as a cucumber, even in amongst the carnage of their first battle together. Perhaps they would manage to survive after all. As Griffiths and Paules dragged the 2 wounded to safety, Jonas cautiously sneaked up to the corner. He quickly threw a grenade around the corner before diving back for cover. The curses of the British soldiers could be heard as it exploded, but Surev's heart dropped slightly when he didn't hear any cries of pain. Suddenly, a soldier peeked around the corner, his eyes briefly locking with Surev's. He jerked back behind the corner just as Surev's men opened fire. "We're caught in the stalemate here. I hope that Fleeg's squad has more luck," he whispered to Jonas. "What's this? Cynicism from the eternal idealist?" Jonas smirked. Fleeg's squad had been quietly creeping through various side corridors, anxious that they would encounter a hidden enemy at every turn. After what seemed like an eternity, Hernandez gave the signal to stop. "The next turn should take us to the enemy squad," Hernandez whispered as he glanced at his electronic map. "Are you sure?" Fleeg asked. "These are old maps, but we've only got one shot at this if we're to surprise them. When I give the signal, you throw everything you can at the next turn. Understand?" "Yes, sir." Fleeg couldn't help but feel uneasy at what was essentially a gamble, but what choice did they have? Fleeg motioned for 2 of his men to follow him as he walked along the edge of the wall closest to the inside of the turn in the corridor. "I'll throw the grenade, then you 2 swing around and fire at anything that moves," he told them. Heart thudding in his chest, Fleeg approached the edge of the turn in the corridor. His shaking hands held onto a grenade as he looked uneasily back towards Hernandez. Hernandez only nodded slightly. Their gazes briefly met, one steely and the other clouded with doubt, before he snapped his head around and threw the grenade. The grenade exploded with what felt like a thunderous roar. Screams of agony echoed along the corridors. Fleeg's 2 men quickly stepped around the turn and opened fire, leading to more cries of pain and English cursing. Fleeg's men dove forward as Fleeg himself rounded the turn to come face to face with the aftermath. Bodies lined the section of the corridor, all of British soldiers. Only one was still moving, and he quickly switched to cover as Fleeg ducked behind some damaged machinery. Panic was heard in the English soldier's voice as he peeked out periodically to fire haphazardly at Fleeg's approaching squad. Given the surprise on his face, it was pretty obvious they caught the enemy squad completely off guard. The enemy soldier yelled out what sounded like a surrender, and Fleeg's men paused. He felt a growing sense of dread at what would happen next. "You know, we can't take any prisoners on this sort of operation," Hernandez said quietly. Fleeg could only nod, his whole body feeling numb. The enemy soldier finally stood from his cover, hands in the air. Fleeg saw the look of terror in his eyes and the sudden realization of what would happen to him. One bullet exited Fleeg's assault rifle, shattering the soldier's skull and spraying his brains behind him. His shocked eyes rolled back in his head as he slowly slumped to the ground. Fleeg's stomach churned at what he had done. The soldier had clearly surrendered, and they gunned him down in cold blood. He looked behind to see Hernandez's purposefully expressionless face and eyes boring into him. Transport 5, platoon reporting. We've entered New London's outer maintenance corridors. Does anyone read me? Anyone? Hernandez called into his communicator. Roger, this is Transport 3 platoon. Transport 3 platoon. Lieutenant Jeffrey here. Our platoon's down to around half strength. He was thankful to hear the reply. Our strength is roughly the same here. We're close to auxiliary air defense control. What is your location? Hernandez replied. We're still roughly 1 kilometer from air defense control. We've been sporadically encountering enemy resistance. Thank God there's no surveillance or heavy defenses in these maintenance passages. Yep, looks like the maps are still accurate. We need you to create a distraction to draw away as many guards as possible from the control room. Can you do this? Silence was the only response Hernandez heard over his radio. He steadily felt the situation slowly slipping from his control. Both him and Joffrey knew what he was really asking, and he wondered what he would do if their positions were reversed. Yes, we can provide an adequate distraction. Jeffrey's voice seemed to burst forth from the silence. Thanks, I'll make sure that the actions of your men are not forgotten, and I'll not forget what you've done. I'll not forget what you've done. Hernandez felt his throat tighten. Just make sure you capture that damn control room. We'll begin the distraction immediately. Hernandez wiped the sweat from his brow. You know the plan, men? We'll get as close as possible to the control room without being detected. We'll then wait a few minutes before launching a full assault into the room. Remember, take no prisoners. Hernandez looked over each of his men. Yes, sir, could be heard from each of them, however they had trouble meeting his gaze. Only Sorev and Jonas looked back, their faces filled with grim determination. Light defences should be expected around the control room, since the auxiliary controls location is expected to be a secret. Hopefully our maps were right. We're on the home stretch, boys, Hernandez said, trying to muster up some enthusiasm. He admitted to himself that he honestly didn't know what to expect. Hernandez nodded at Sorev, who nodded back. They all had taken positions behind what should be the final door, before a straight corridor that led to the control room. Sorev slowly pushed the door open, trying to be as quiet as possible, but couldn't avoid making a creaking noise. His heart was in his throat. Beyond the door, they saw the corridor lead straight into the corner of a room, and to their amazement, there were no soldiers stationed in the corridor itself. Within their view of the room, they could see an enemy soldier slowly turn his head towards them. Shock briefly registered on the soldier's face before he was perforated by their bullets. Get in there now, Hernandez yelled as his platoon surged forward. Another soldier appeared in the far doorway, but was shot in the shoulder before he had chance to fire. His gun fired wildly as he was thrown back into the far wall. Sorev saw one of his men enter the room first and was instantly riddled with bullets. His blood sprayed all over Sorev as Sorev rolled through the door. He ended up behind a console as his comrades burst into the room, shouting and letting loose in the room. He briefly peeked out of cover and quickly shot an officer in the arm who tried to sneak a shot from behind an upturned table. The officer's pistol still discharged a single shot into a nearby Spanish soldier before the officer slumped to the ground, groaning in pain. With the few soldiers and officers in the room dispatched, Hernandez's platoon swept over the room and secured it. Found one hiding underneath a desk, exclaimed Griffiths. Surprise shone through Hernandez's eyes as a woman slowly rose from behind a desk, her arms in the air. She was a plain and rather dowdy officer, however her severe features were clouded in fear. Sorev and Flegg waited for the inevitable order, however, Hernandez simply stared at her. After a few seconds, he barked an order to disarm and tie her up, his cold eyes never leaving her face. She may be useful if she's willing to talk, or perhaps as collateral, Hernandez said simply. As Griffiths tied her up, Hernandez practically leaped to one of the consoles in anticipation. It was the Air Defense Auxiliary Control Room after all. Hope these codes work, he muttered as he quickly typed in a long series of numbers into the console. Our intel was perfect. These codes have at least temporarily blocked off their main HQ from using the anti-air defences and given us access instead. Hernandez could barely contain his own excitement now. Lieutenant Joffrey, your distraction worked perfectly. Air defences under our control. What is your status? Hernandez said into his radio. For a few long moments, only silence was heard. Everyone in the room seemed to hold their breath at the same time. Finally, Jonas broke the silence. They were good men. Their sacrifices were not in vain. They might still be alive, you know. Maybe their radio is down. Perhaps our frequencies have been jammed, or have heard himself speak, though even he struggled to believe his own words. Well, if any did survive, then their next objective would be to head to the control room. We'll need all the reinforcements we can get, Hernandez said, his face tightening. Might as well signal the fleet that the air defences are down, he said. He quickly typed in some commands into the console. An anti-air artillery cannon on the outside of the dome fired 3 times. On the radar screen, he saw an orbiting Spanish ship's blip disappear as it jumped out of orbit. Jumped out of orbit. For the first time today, Hernandez allowed a sliver of a smile to appear on his lips. And there you have it. That's chapter 1 done. So yeah, it's rather interesting narrating that actually. It's the first time I've actually narrated a chapter of a story like that. And yeah, there's more to come. The story's already been written. It's a very short one, 4 chapters in total. So yeah, let me know what you think. Provide feedback, and if you want to see a textual version of the story, then I've got a link to the story on DeviantArt in the description of the video. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next chapter.